How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga. Today is Thursday, July 25th, and I have another great show planned for you guys around the NFL. A lot of things to talk about, mostly still on training camp and some contract situations going on. We're going to start off with talking about the Bengals and some of the comments their owner, Mike Brown, made in regards to Ja'Marr Chase, and contrasting comments that he made with T. Higgins. So, interesting point of view there from Mike Brown that we're going to get into. Then, more on Haason Reddick, going through the chain of events that happened that led to him holding out at this point in training camp, and when could we expect something to get done. Then also, Kyle Shanahan appeared on one of the Athletics shows this week, talking about Brock Purdy, talking about the current situation with every contract negotiation he has to get done, and also Bill Belichick almost joining their roster as a defensive coordinator. That'll be in the first half of the show. We'll get to the other half later on in the show. But for right now, before I get started, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any comments or questions you'd like to make, to use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. By using that link, I'm able to see your question or comment. I can read it out loud and just carry the conversation probably somewhere else. Get your guys' thoughts on anything I say or on any of the topics. And it's also a big help for the show and the network, so if you guys would, we'd greatly appreciate it if you guys would use that tip and donations link at gsmcpodcast.net. But with that being said now, we can jump straight into our first topic. Very interesting comments made from Cincinnati and specifically their owner, Mike Brown, with obviously T. Higgins being franchise tag this year. He already signed the tender. He is going to play this year under that franchise tag, and a lot of conversations have been around how can the Bengals afford, all three of them, Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, and T. Higgins. But the more that this carried on, franchise tagging him, leaving him as the only franchise tag player for 2024, this one seemed like the most obvious one that wasn't going to get done. I never felt too confident that, as much as the Bengals said that they wanted to extend him, that they'd like to have him on their team, I never felt that this was going to go beyond, really, this year if he got traded, but really for sure not next season. It looks like this year is going to be the last year for T. Higgins on the Cincinnati Bengals, and not just from my intuition, but reading into some of the comments that their owner Mike Brown said recently, starting with Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase also, just before I get into T. Higgins, training camp is starting, but he is at the practice facility for the Cincinnati Bengals, but he's actually not taking part in practice as well. Similar to Brandon Ayuk, similar to Jordan Love, they're there, they're just not practicing, trying to get a contract extension. And I know, based on the rookie deal, in terms of just base salary, Ja'Marr is making something criminally low for 2024. I think it's close to $5 or $6 million just off of his rookie salary for this year. So you can't blame him, but also from that standpoint, he just became extension eligible. So I didn't think he was going to hold in at this point. But with that being the case, the Bengals owner, Mike Brown, made his intentions crystal clear when talking about Ja'Marr Chase and how he felt about getting an extension done with him. He said that they are going to bend over backwards to make it happen. Weird comment to make. You could have said it somewhere else. We're not going to go there, but you get what he was trying to say. Trying to get it done as much as possible with Ja'Marr. Obviously, the connection with Joe Burrow. You'd want those two guys on the team for the next 10 years, obviously. But it's going to cost a lot of money. And you get an idea with Mike Brown that he wants this to get done as soon as possible, but he also said that he doesn't know exactly when it's going to get done because this year was the first year he could be extended. It was the first year he was eligible, but again, we're talking about a lot of money, and you're almost competing with Brandon Ayuk now, CD, to get a deal done, and ideally you get it done before then, but with everything else going on, I don't think that they were ready at this point in time to try and get something done with him this year. And if that's the case, they're just going to have to wait it out a bit more with him sitting on the sidelines, just being there and trying to navigate that awkward situation with your star player just sitting on the sidelines. But that's what he said about Ja'Marr Chase, doing everything possible to get him to sign that extension to keep him for the foreseeable future. But when it came to T. Higgins, not the same sort of energy, not the same sort of optimism that you'd get when talking about a receiver that has played very well for you and has produced very well for you as well. The comments that Mike Brown said, very different to what he said about Ja'Marr Chase. He said, the pie is not going to grow. It's only going to be a certain size, but when you reach a point with your quarterback that you have to pay him a big contract, that takes a disproportionate piece out of the pie, which means you have less left to pay others. You can't just pay people willy-nilly. You're restricted on how much you can pay, and we really like T. Higgins, but he also added just briefly afterwards that that they wish to sign him, but it has to fit into a certain level that they have an idea about with how the salary cap goes. And also, if they can't do that, then it just simply can't happen, which when he mentioned Ja'Marr Chase talking about bending over backwards to make it happen, you sense that eagerness, that patience, almost hopefulness that he was going to get it done, was going to do everything possible and almost impossible to make sure Ja'Marr is on the team going forward for the next 8 years or something like that. But when you look at these comments made by him on T. Higgins, very much indecisive, lackluster, pessimistic, almost giving up hope, thinking that this is not going to work itself out, just almost preparing everybody for the circumstances that they're facing when most likely T. Higgins is going to move on after this year. And you understand, I understand, that Ja'Marr Chase has done everything that he can on the football field to earn that praise, that sort of favoritism, you could say, for Mike Brown to make sure he's on the team. If anybody has to leave, it's not going to be Ja'Marr Chase. He's done everything. He's produced. He's been in the conversation for one of the top wide receivers since he stepped foot in the league. So you can't blame Mike Brown for saying it, but also talking about T. Higgins in this way, with having Zach Taylor and other members of that organization saying how much they want to keep T. Higgins. I feel like you didn't have to say too much of what Mike Brown said in these comments that sort of pushed everybody to the understanding that T. Higgins is not looking good right now, and don't be surprised almost when we can't sign him. We can't just pay all these people all this amount of money, basically. Don't be surprised if he moves on next year, is the kind of vibe I was getting from Mike Brown. And again, it doesn't help T. Higgins' case that he's coming off one of the worst years statistically for himself. He was hampered by a hamstring injury, but stat-wise, it was by far his worst year. After coming off of 2 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, this past year he didn't reach that, and he was injured with that hamstring injury, like I said. And Ja'Marr Chase has just not failed to show up each and every week, even with a backup quarterback. He has shown his talent, and he's probably worth at least $32 million per year, at minimum $30 million per year. So he's going to take a big portion of that pie, like Mike Brown referenced there in his statement. So you already have Joe taking about probably a third of that, maybe more. And Jamar's probably going to take another almost third, a fourth of that pie. So that's the consequence. You can't have all these great players getting top of the market price. And same thing with the 49ers, same thing with the Cowboys. It just seems like Mike Brown was a little bit more clear about it, a little bit more blunt about it, that I just wasn't expecting, and I didn't think it was too necessary. Honestly, when I saw these comments, it really surprised me to say that you just can't pay people willy-nilly, having a cautious approach there. But with Ja'Marr, you're saying we're going to do everything in our power to do it. So that kind of message that it sends to T. Higgins, it just confirms to me that this is going to be his last year. And if T. Higgins wasn't believing that after seeing these comments, I don't know what else you needed to hear to believe that at this point. But with him being franchise tagged, obviously, the deadline to negotiate a long-term deal has already passed. So he will be playing this year on the tag, like I mentioned, and he will be a free agent officially again next year in 2025. But now, this could honestly be a good thing and a bad thing for, or a good thing for T. Higgins and also a good thing for the Bengals. Yes, you're most likely going to lose him. That's my estimation. But this year, 2024, could be one of the best, or you could try to make it one of the best if you're the Bengals and if you're T. Higgins. T. Higgins, in some of the comments he made in returning to training camp, he said that he came back mostly to try and win a Super Bowl. And I think those are realistic expectations that should be something that the Bengals are shooting for, because everything right now is getting pushed to the middle of the table. You're going all in, just adding to the group of teams that have said that already this year. You're going all in this year. Joe Burrow's back. Hopefully you have him for at least 15, 14 games of the season. Jamar is probably going to play. He's just going to hold in for right now. And you have T. Higgins at least playing for you this season. This could all work out beautifully for the Bengals with having their quarterback back, having their 2-star receivers, being a juggernaut on offense to where you get into the playoffs. You usually perform well there when Joe Burrow is healthy and able to play. So that's a good inclination for the Bengals. So if that all works out, they could have a great year this year. And then by that point, you satisfy yourself if you're the Bengals. You get as far as you can. Maybe you reach another Super Bowl. Maybe you get to the AFC Championship game. And then also for T. Higgins, knowing that this is a contract year, you're going to ball out. Hopefully you stay healthy. You produce another 1,000-yard season or just your best season in the NFL overall. And not only does that help the Bengals in reaching their goals, but it also helps T. Higgins. Unfortunately, it might mean that he prices out for the Bengals, that they just can't afford him based on the numbers, hopefully, that he produces. Then you hit the free agent market again. His agent is David Mulugheta, has negotiated and agreed to a lot of major deals for his client. So if T. Higgins does what he does on the football field, he reaches that potential, hopefully exceeds it in 2024. It'll be a great thing for the Bengals to produce on the field, but also for himself. It'll give David Mulugheta more of an incentive to get Higgins, and T. Higgins can hopefully find himself with a brand new team and with a lot of money in his pocket, ideally. So that's the belief that I'm feeling right now. I had that feeling before, but now after these comments, it almost has confirmed it that, the Bengals want Jamar Chase at any cost, but with T. Higgins, they're just going to wait and see. And is it fair? Probably not, but even with that, you kind of got that sense, at least I did, that this was going to be it. And it just comes down to the fact that they have their hands tied, so they're going to have to make a choice. And kudos to them for making a choice almost now and not hanging around the rim like some other teams. But that's where the situation stands right now for the Bengals. We're going to leave it at that and move on with our next topic, talking about Haason Reddick, where we came from at the start of this offseason in terms of Haason getting traded and why he didn't show up. And now that he's officially said that he's holding out, when can we expect to see him? How could this all be resolved? Sooner the better for the New York Jets. We're going to talk about everything that led to this when we return after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are jumping right back into the action on Haason Reddick and talking about his situation with the New York Jets up until this point. Technically a member of the New York Jets, but is he really? If he hasn't stepped onto the field, we haven't seen him in any training gear near his teammates or anything like that. Over contract reasons up until this point, we are fully now in the thick of things of training camp, and the fans in New York are wondering when this could finally be resolved with Haason Reddick. Just to go over some things to kind of recap everything to know how we got to this point and where we could go after that. We're going to recap. I'm going to give you guys some context about this entire situation and how a misunderstanding led to this whole other situation now. It's a little bit confusing, so try and follow along with me as we try and break it down. Haason Reddick obviously was traded to the New York Jets back on April 1st, and since then he hasn't been present, obviously, through OTAs and minicamp as he enters the final year of his contract that he did sign with the Philadelphia Eagles back in 2022. It was a 3-year deal, so now he's entering into that final year, and he wants an extension or at least something reworked up until now, but nothing has really happened with the New York Jets, and it has since been reported by SNY that he does continue to continue this holdout now into training camp until something is worked out with his contract. And further along, SNY claimed that the New York Jets were open to an extension even before the trade was finalized with Haason Reddick. They were already thinking about it, obviously thinking and knowing that Haason would want something resolved with his contract. According to SNY, they offered a contract extension before the trade was even finalized, and this contract extension that they did offer to Haason before the trade, and then once the trade was finalized, it did include a raise in his salary, but it wasn't what Haason Reddick was looking for at that current moment. Sources say that Haason wants around $25 to $28 million in any new contract that he wants to receive, but it seems like that's not going to be a problem for the Jets because more reports say that the Jets are willing to make him one of the highest paid edge rushers in the NFL. But now comes the problems and the misunderstandings and trying to figure out who's going to budge first, really, because it seems like there shouldn't be a problem, right? Because the Jets want to make him a high-paid edge rusher. Haason wants to be a high-paid edge rusher. So where is the disconnect? Well, in order for the Jets to get to the point where they officially offer him the contract for him to sign and everything like that to be one of the highest paid edge rushers, the Jets and Reddick, apparently, according to SNY, had an understanding that in order to get that deal, to negotiate that contract even further, Haason Reddick needed to show up to training camp, at least to minicamp through the offseason and at least be there, and then into the regular season as well. And then eventually during the regular season, the Jets were hoping to come to terms with a new contract and offer it to him during the regular season. But in the meantime, they were also willing to restructure his current deal to maybe give him a little bit more money, give him a little bit more guaranteed money for the time being for showing up to training camp, minicamp, and the offseason. And then they were going to work out something during the regular season. But he needed to show up and perform, and they were willing to do that. The Jets were willing to do that if they got a little bit from Haason Reddick. But with that being said, SNY continued to mention how the Jets had an understanding that Reddick was on board, and they even went as far as saying that Reddick told the Jets that he would be there, he would be present during the offseason, that they came to an understanding. Haason Reddick thought it was going to be fair that just showing up, get a restructured deal, and then lead into a contract extension. SNY claims that that was all understood at that point in time when Haason was traded to the Jets, when everything was getting finalized. That was the understanding between both of them, apparently. But you guys can obviously see, if you're following the situation, none of that happened. None of that actually did happen. He's holding out, didn't show up at all, and now the Jets are unwilling to obviously hand out that extension, unwilling to hand out that contract restructure. And in the same breath, Haason Reddick is also unwilling to show up to training camp now until he gets an extension or probably more guaranteed money. So that's where we are right now as we start here in the first week of training camp. That's where there was a bit of a misunderstanding, extension sooner than you would have hoped. But now we find ourselves at a point where who's going to budge first, who's going to give in first, really, to get this thing moving. Because right now you have two parties just staring at each other, just waiting for the other one to blink, really, to see if anybody moves up until that point. But with all this craziness going on and this just misunderstanding of words, reports say that the Jets are not worried about Reddick's absence affecting him during the regular season. They're pretty confident in that once he does show up, hopefully sooner rather than later, that he will be ready. They are confident that he is training, he is getting ready for the season. So that isn't something that they're too worried about, the fact that he's not there. And also, they hope he does show up soon, obviously, but they want to restructure his deal currently, and then they want to work on that extension, like I said, heading into the regular season. The sooner he shows up, hopefully the sooner they can get that done for him. But again, they're unwilling to make that first step, which is something I will address in just a few seconds. But just to round out all the context of it, sources tell SNY that there's a 0% chance that this gets to any point where the Jets consider releasing him or trading Haason Reddick, despite all this extra baggage that has come with just getting Haason on the field close to his teammates. They're not going to get to a point at all, it seems like they're going to trade him or anything like that. So right now they're getting tested a little bit. Their patience is getting tested with Haason Reddick. So when can we expect him to get there? Well, to give a clear answer, you don't honestly know. It's a weird situation where the Jets, from the Jets standpoint, you knew that you were going to be taking on this deal. And most likely you knew that Haason Reddick was going to want a contract extension, like most players do. Even if you had an understanding somewhat with Haason at the beginning of it, not to say that you shouldn't have trusted that, but every player, it seems like, gets to a point where they go to the offseason, OTAs, and minicamp. And like I mentioned, I think it was yesterday or the episode before, with just how the offseason is structured, players, more often than not, if they don't even want to admit it, but they definitely think it, that the offseason just isn't something, the way it's structured right now, isn't something that they feel too inclined, too obligated to attend, especially when, like Aaron Rodgers pointed out, Haason's teammate, that OTAs and minicamp weren't really too different at all. One was called minicamp, but they were still on an OTA schedule, like Aaron Rodgers said. So that piled on top of the fact that Haason just wants a contract extension, you can be surprised that he wasn't there, but also, are you really surprised if Haason just didn't show up because he starts working out by himself, he hears everything coming out at a camp, and knowing that everything really isn't too different from the benefits he can get from working out from himself? Not to call the Jets naive or anything like that, but to fully believe that he was going to show up and, kind of have this gentleman's agreement that he was just going to show up and have all the confidence in the Jets to get this done. You don't have to fully think that they're naive, but again, you almost had to have this little thought in the back of your head that this could be a possibility, and now it is a possibility. And I've heard a lot of people in media talk about, the Jets should just, give in, should just hand over, take the first step, be the bigger person in these negotiations, and just say, all right, Haason, we're going to give you what you want. We're going to restructure it, and then you just show up, because of the bigger picture around the New York Jets, that they haven't had success since 2010 was the last time they made the playoffs. So they're in a situation right now where they're desperate, honestly. To put it in simplest terms, they're desperate. They need to have success. They already got Aaron Rodgers back. This is such a crucial season for the Jets that I do understand the point that at some point the Jets can't, stand on their ego or pride or anything like that, because they have no room to. They have no room to do that when they just need some glimpse of hope. And now that they finally do have it, they're trying to play hardball, like almost like they don't need Haason to show up. Almost, it seems like they don't need him. They'll just wait it out, think that he's gonna buckle down first, and think he's just gonna come back. In context, in terms of long-term, history with the Jets and with Haason, people don't like the stance that the Jets are taking right now. And I'm not agreeing that the Jets should waver and just give in right away, but it's going to get to a point, I believe, where that's seriously going to become a possibility. I don't think you do it now. You can stand on your pride right now and say that we're not going to give in yet. We're just going to wait it out and see. And that's not a bad thing, but once you get into August, now that we're getting closer and closer to the month of August and preseason like that, if nothing's really moving, the Jets just almost have to look at this like, all right, we're not gaining anything with just sitting here with our hands, or with just sitting on our hands. Let's just go out there and talk to him, tell him we're going to extend him. and work something out with more urgency. And then at that point, you can get him back in the building, get him to maybe ease up on his stance, get him back in the building, and then you could work something out more urgently. Whereas right now, it doesn't seem like they're really taking too many steps to do that as of right now. So this could carry on for maybe the next week, but after that, I think the Jets should just, quite honestly, just stop playing around, go out there, get Haason to come back, extend him. If that's already your thought based on the sources and SNY reporting it, you might as well just go do it, throw everything aside and just get it done. Then you don't have to worry about anything else, and you don't have to worry about everybody else talking about these issues away from football that you guys have to deal with. And that's where it stands right now. You don't know a clear answer where it could go, but that's the way I'm feeling about Haason and the Jets. That's where I think this could carry on, and how the Jets could just resolve this, move on, because it is in their best interest that Haason is out there on the field because of how much is riding on this season. On the defensive side of the ball, you're confident, but you reach another level with Haason Reddick also being out there for your team. And now that you have Aaron Rodgers back, you just want to eliminate everything else and just focus on football. At least that's where I'm at with the Jets. Hopefully they get it done and Haason signs an extension with them so they could just focus on football. But let me know what you guys think about it. Do you guys side more on the side of the Jets? Should they wait it out, or should they just stop playing around and just give Haason what he wants? Leave it in the chat box or in the comments section in this video. But in the meantime, we're going to move on. We're going to head into a quick break, and when we return, we're going to get into that interview that Kyle Shanahan had this week with The Athletic, talking about Bill Belichick almost joining the 49ers, Brock Purdy and his extension next offseason, and also just some general contract talks about his team and paying some of these guys a lot of money from Kyle Shanahan. We're going to get to that right after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back now on the show to continue on with another interesting set of statements from Kyle Shanahan. He appeared on this week's episode of The Athletics podcast called The TK Show, and he made an appearance this week talking about a plethora of different topics around not just his team, but prior moments that he's had to deal with in his career, with one of them specifically being trading DeForest Buckner and how that has led into now the similar situation that they're facing this year with trying to pay all their guys and trying to keep this roster, trying to keep this all-star roster really all together. It has been tough, and he references DeForest Buckner as an example, also talking about Brock Purdy, but the most interesting one was this Bill Belichick story that I came across. This was posted a few days ago, but I wanted to come on here and talk about it because of just the hypothetical possibility that this could have been a reality is nuts to think about, is nuts to even consider that Bill Belichick could have potentially joined Kyle Shanahan, because that's what he said. He revealed that he had serious interest in bringing in Bill Belichick at some point this offseason, at least as his defensive coordinator, just because it's obviously Bill Belichick, and he explained it in this statement I had here for you guys. Basically, Kyle Shanahan went into it saying, I threw it out to him. I can't believe he's not a head coach of a team right now. I know what I would do if I was an owner, so that shocks me. And the last thing you want to do is insult someone like Bill Belichick. But I know he just loves ball in its simplest form, so I threw it all out to him, whatever he wanted to do. And he even asked Bill about it. he went up to him, he approached him, he asked him if he wanted to join his staff. But Bill, very nicely, he said, very appreciatively, turned Kyle Shanahan down. And like most people know, it's not like Bill Belichick's just not going to be doing anything this offseason. He's actually going to be appearing on the Pat McAfee show a lot during the regular season. He's going to be on the Manning cast a lot as well on Monday nights. And also he's going to be on Inside the NFL as well. So he's definitely keeping busy, definitely still being involved in football. But this was something else. This was something that I wasn't expecting, that could have been anything, because nothing was said about this. Everything was kept pretty quiet. And, Bill Belichick, whether or not you like him as a head coach, whether or not you think that he was going to still have a future in the NFL after he left the New England Patriots, and there was all those reports about people not wanting him being power-driven, wanting all the control. You throw that all out the window. You can't really argue with the fact that Bill Belichick is one of the most renowned, successful football figures in NFL history. So the fact that he could have joined this juggernaut of the team is mind-blowing. And you can understand it also from Bill Belichick's standpoint. Like being a defensive coordinator is probably something he would excel at. He would be fantastic at it, especially with all those weapons that they have on the defensive side of the ball. You pair him up with Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Nick Bosa, all these guys that they just have at their disposal. It would have really been unfair. And you always say it every year, like the 49ers are the clear favorites to at least make it to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl. But with Bill Belichick on that team, like, I don't even know how you could have stopped that. With him and Kyle Shanahan on the offensive side of the ball, it might have been the most powerful, most just creative two minds working together, the most creative duo, calling plays on the offensive side of the ball and on the defensive side of the ball as well. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. I would have loved for it to happen. It would have shocked everybody, the potential that this could have created for the 49ers to finally maybe slay the dragon in the Kansas City Chiefs if they saw him again. But even in past comments that Bill Belichick has made, he has even said that being a coordinator is one of the best jobs in the NFL. And the fact that he had this opportunity shocked me that he didn't take it, but all the reports say that he is still looking to be a head coach, and that desire to not, give up on that, really, it seems like he's going to jump back into it next offseason, and I'd be shocked if he is passed up on again by all these teams. Like, there usually is looking for a new head coach. It could be the Giants, it could be the Jaguars, it could be maybe the Bills or something like that, that could be looking for new head coaches along those lines. So I feel that he's going to have an opportunity, but for him to turn this down, I was definitely shocked. I didn't think Kyle Shanahan would offer it to him, but obviously after getting rejected by Bill Belichick, they promoted Nick Sorensen to be their defensive coordinator, and also hiring Brandon Staley, the former head coach of the Chargers, to be an assistant on that defensive side of the ball. So the potential was there. The hypotheticals are always going to be there, but super interesting to see how Kyle Shanahan, approached that situation with Bill. But further along this interview, Kyle Shanahan continued, and he went into a topic of going over one of the biggest decisions he had to make in his coaching career. He explained how having to trade DeForest Buckner to Indianapolis in 2020 was, in quotes, one of the hardest things he's ever had to go through, and that he really didn't want to get rid of DeForest Buckner at all. And you could obviously see why. DeForest, for everything that he did with the 49ers, and then just continuing that success, getting paid with the Indianapolis Colts. It's no secret why you'd want that guy on your team. But he mentioned how he almost had to do it with what they were trying to build as a team, thinking long-term, thinking into the future. It really just came down to how many players they could get for DeForest Buckner if they weren't going to get to a contract extension with him. He didn't want to get rid of him, but at the end of the day, they were able to keep Arik Armstead, which in hindsight he is gone now, but he did provide you with some good for the 49ers. He was able to keep Jimmy Ward, and they got a first-round pick over it. So, yeah, it stinks. Yeah, the 49ers have been so good for so long, but it hasn't come without making some extremely tough decisions, and they get a lot of credit. They should get a lot of credit for making those tough decisions and still staying at the top of the mountain. But it almost leads into what they are still facing now, currently in this present day. And Kyle Shanahan, I thought, had a good quote that kind of sums up everything, that, sums up his mindset with going into some of these contract negotiations and trying to keep this all-star roster together. He said, "I want every player on our team to make as much money as possible, but if you do that, only one guy is doing it. Only one guy is going to be able to do that." So that's as simple and as real as it gets, honestly, with these teams trying to work out everything, trying to crunch the numbers and seeing how everybody fits in. Not everybody's going to be happy. Like I mentioned, they already traded DeForest. They let Eric Armstead go in free agency now, the longest tenured 49er on the team. Those are hard decisions that they have to make, and now they face the same thing with Brandon Ayuk next offseason, potentially Debo and him coming towards the end of his deal, Diamador Lenore as well. These guys that are pivotal pieces, someone's going to have to be the odd man left out, and it's going to stink, but still giving credit to the 49ers and how well they've kept this ship afloat. I think they do deserve their flowers for that, but I thought it was interesting, him referencing back to DeForest Buckner like 4 years ago now, and then still being in the conversation for one of the best teams. They still face the same problem, probably over the last 4 years now, with trying to keep everybody together. So it brings up the question about this Super Bowl window. How long do they have before they at least get one Super Bowl? Kyle Shanahan doesn't have the best records in Super Bowls right now, so hopefully with all these tough decisions that he's had to make, you'd hope that he gets at least one Super Bowl in this entire window that he's had to work with, because it would be very harsh, I think, if he doesn't get any reward for managing everything that he's had to go through, but that is still to be seen. And the last thing he mentioned was discussing Brock Purdy's looming contract extension, probably next offseason. Basically summing it up, like saying that it can be overwhelming. You look at some of these big contracts and you start thinking, some coaches start thinking into the future, and that it could be overwhelming, thinking about, if Trevor and Joe are making 55, what's Dak going to make this offseason? What's Tua going to get? What's Jordan Love going to get? And then next season, like, that's going to be awful. That's going to be a lot of stress thinking about how much Brock Purdy could make just to fit into the market. So he said it could be overwhelming in that sense, but also it's all relative. He takes into account how it affects the salary cap, but delving into specific quarterbacks and seeing how much one is compared, or how much one is worth compared to this other guy, how much one could be better than this other guy making more money. He really tries to stay away from all of that and focus in on how much this quarterback that he has on his team, Brock Purdy, how much he has contributed to the success, to being a leader, how much has he improved since they drafted him. And he takes all those factors into account more so than trying to fit him into the market price and seeing if he's better than Jordan Love, if he's better than Dak, should he get more money than Trevor, should he get more money than Joe. He doesn't really dive into that. He keeps it more in how much he has helped their team. And I think that's a fascinating way of thinking about it, just because, again, he's dealing with all these massive contracts, and you have a lot of players, Christian, Nick Bosa, Kyle Juszczyk, Fred Warner most likely, making top of the market price on all of them. And then the quarterback, now that it is coming up in the near future, he's also probably going to make top of the market price. And it can get to a point where it almost boils over a bunch. It could work out very negatively, not again to, dump on the New York Giants, but that situation, how they handled everything, was almost what you don't want to do. I don't want to make it sound bad on the Giants, but they definitely didn't handle it as accordingly. And Kyle Shanahan now handling all the contracts that he's had to deal with now with a quarterback coming up, it's going to be tricky, but I feel confident in just the history, the experience he's had over the last 4 years of doing it over and over and over again, that it could be something that could work. But again, you feel like there's going to be an odd man left out. And is that going to be Brandon? Is that going to be Debo? That's all, to be determined at this point. Trent Williams is also another one, looking for a contract extension, looking for a reworked deal. More things piling up on the 49ers, and it's almost not a miracle, but it's almost remarkable just how they continue to be, through all these challenges financially, office-wise, that they are still able to put out a great product on the field. The expectations are still there regardless if they lose all these players or not. They are still considered to be one of the best teams, so no one's going to feel bad for them if they go out there and they don't perform. That's what comes with being a good team, and hopefully they can figure it all out because they definitely add to the spectacle, to the entertainment of the NFL. So that's what Kyle Shanahan had to say on those topics. With that being said, we're going to move on to the second half of the show now. 2 more topics to talk about. Zay Flowers mentioning just the main area of his game that he wants to improve in 2024. And we're just going to go through a quick round of contract updates of Matthew Judon, Alvin Kamara, Amari Cooper, and Matthew Stafford on where they are with their restructured deals and who is looking for potentially an extension going forward. That is all coming up after this break. Don't go anywhere.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Thank you for joining me back here on the show. Into the 4th segment now, jumping from the NFC into the AFC and one of the best teams in the AFC from last year. The Baltimore Ravens, and one of the most exciting players, Zay Flowers, had a very good, very solid rookie year for the Baltimore Ravens. 77 receptions, 858 yards, 5 touchdowns, and to me, not just on the numbers, but as he progressed through the start of the season to the end of the season, in the playoffs as well. To me, he has the best look at a number 1 receiver on the Baltimore Ravens roster than any of the other ones. Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, all those guys. To me, Zay Flowers looks to be like the most talented and the one that just has that different ability out of everybody, out of all their catch passers, honestly. But Flowers, only heading into his 2nd year, he spoke over the weekend as Baltimore started their training camp on what he wanted to improve heading into year 2, because it is going to be a massive year. People expect more out of Zay, to get more out of this passing game and just more really to get over that hump and win the AFC Championship game, not just get there. To that, Zay Flowers said, probably deep passes, probably more deep passes. I feel like I can go get them. If they're in the air, I'll go get them. That's one of the things I want to improve. To answer your question, I'll say that's one of the things, just hitting more deep balls, because that's what I did in college. So I want to come out and try to hit it more this year. And he just mentioned that working on it more as a group and specifically with Lamar Jackson is going to improve not only the production, but the amount of times they do it. Because honestly, from the passing game, you don't really get too much. And talking about down the field passes, it doesn't come in bunches really for the Baltimore Ravens. They were around the middle average tier of NFL teams on the amount of times they hit the deep ball. So not only is it going to be helpful for Zay Flowers to do it, but if he gets better at it, Baltimore as a whole is going to get better at it as well from the production-wise, also to that point. But it is tough right now just because I talked about it on the YouTube Shorts, and I think I mentioned it on here before, that Lamar is still sidelined, still not 100% with that random illness that he had to start training camp. So he did come back on Wednesday, but he only lasted about an hour out there. So still unsure when he can come back to develop more chemistry with Zay Flowers. But it is something I'd like to see a lot more out of the Ravens, because then you get into this conversation about the potential of this passing game and the amount of hype and the amount of belief I have in Zay Flowers and just these other guys too that complement the passing game as well, with Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews obviously, and if Rashad Bateman stays healthy, he could definitely contribute more than he has in years past. That's a lot of weapons that you have now. Maybe not the elite of the elite that people have been wanting Lamar to play with, like in free agency adding someone like I don't know, like T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk or something like that. Maybe not up to that level, but in terms of quantity, you definitely have more guys than I think you've ever had in Lamar Jackson's time there. And you get into this question about the distribution of the passing game and the running game, because with Derrick Henry there, obviously he's going to be a major part of it. And when you go back to the AFC Championship game, the biggest gripe with the Ravens and just how that game ended was the way that they were playing in that second half. Everybody was criticizing them pretty harshly about going away from what they were all off season, saying how the Ravens weren't getting stopped by the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs had no answer for their running game, but for some reason in the second half they stopped. They started passing a lot more, and you saw their offense look completely different than it did all year. It stuttered a lot. They didn't have too much rhythm in it, and they just really didn't put up the points compared to the Chiefs, where they just got the edge on them, and they went into Baltimore and beat them in an unfamiliar fashion for the Ravens, because at home you have that advantage and you don't play as you're accustomed to. Now you bring Derrick Henry, and you really have no excuse to run the rock almost every play of every game, to just continue to be who you are. But in the same breath, I just have some questions about this running game with the Ravens that I still believe is going to be good. But I feel like there should be more questions with this team that is being brought up on the running game aspect of it, because I am well aware of the fact that Derrick Henry is awesome. At 30 years old, it doesn't really matter. I put him in that conversation with Christian and Saquon Barkley, and now pairing him up with Lamar, it's scary. It's going to be intimidating. It's going to be mean. It's going to be ugly for opposing defenses. No one's going to want to tackle him. But again, at 30 years old, I just would like to see the same type of doubts, same type of energy kept with Derrick and these other running backs like Saquon, who had major doubts, at least from his own team, in getting paid. Same thing with Najee, Ramondre Stevenson, DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, guys like this. They're not even 30 years old yet, but there was still a lot of doubt about whether or not they were supposed to get paid that money. And Derrick Henry isn't getting paid $10 million. He is getting, I think, around 8 or 9 right now. But again, the production side of that, how much stock people are putting into Derrick, and this offense to be 70-30 running over passing, I have doubts if that is going to be the game plan. It is just everything that the Ravens have been over the last few years. But I think this year, not only do I have doubts about the offensive line and things like that, and Derrick just in himself as well at 30 years old, but I think this is the best year that gives you the best excuse to try out the passing game more so than in years past, just because of all the weapons that now you have at your disposal. Zay looks great. Isaiah likely broke out last year in the playoffs. Mark Andrews unfortunately got hurt, but he is still one of the top 4 tight ends in the NFL. And Rashad Bateman as well, contributing to this offense. I think now it's the perfect time to at least experiment with it a little bit more. I don't think it's crazy for this team to try and maybe be more 60-40, still in favor of the run, or maybe 50-50. Ideally, you get to that spot, because this Ravens team definitely has a lot of potential as an overall offense, I believe, because if you split it up a little bit more, not only do you not wear down Derrick Henry, and I know they rotate in running backs in and out of that lineup as well, but it's still going to be run dominated most likely. But I think if you kind of split it up a little bit more now, not only do you, one, give Derrick Henry more room to run, because honestly, he is not a small running back. He is not someone that could fit through these tight crevices in the line. Most likely they're going to be running a lot of outside zone stuff. And with this offensive line, losing Zeitler, losing Simpson, losing Moses, those are 3 starters, legitimate starters for this Ravens team that they are now gone. I don't specifically know who they have in there to replace them, but you can tell me you're a little bit weary of the production level dropping a little bit from that aspect. And also, with Derrick maybe not having as much room to maneuver now, you don't want to condense everything and make it tight for Derrick, who's already massive, that he can't really maneuver through tight spaces and get through because of the size of him. To try and spread that out, to try and alleviate some of that pressure, try and make the defense respect your passing game a little bit more. Now that you have the weapons in place, you don't have to line up in 12 personnel every game, line up with an extra offensive lineman with a fullback in there. You can try and be a little bit more creative because really, Lamar at the beginning of his career, there was a lot of doubts about his arm, about his accuracy and things like that. But now I think I've seen enough growth from Lamar that I don't think they should be too gun-shy about spreading this team out a little bit more, trying to use more of their passing game to try and spread out opposing defenses, scare them a little bit, intimidate them with maybe a deep threat like Zay Flowers over the middle with your 2 tight ends. And then you get people away from the box, not too much because Derek is still Derek. You get them away from the box a little bit more, and that makes it a bit easier for you to get some more yards, to give Derrick Henry some more room to work with, rather than the defense knowing you're going to run it every single play. They have 10 guys in the box already. It seems like it is comfortable for you, but I think this is the best opportunity now for the Ravens to be a little bit uncomfortable, try it out, try to be more creative. And I know it goes completely against with what everybody was criticizing them in the AFC Championship game, but I just don't think they had the weapons really at that point to do it. And to try it out for the first time also in the AFC Championship game, that wasn't the smartest move, honestly. But if you build it up, if you practice it right from the start of the season, then by the time you get to that AFC Championship game, then once you do it, it looks cleaner. It's not like you're going out there and not knowing what to do, what the play is. You already have rhythm with it. You have experience with it from 2024 and the entire year. That's where it could look a little bit better if they try and do this. Not to say that Derek shouldn't be featured at all. He's going to get a lot of carries, but I don't think it's crazy for this Ravens team to experiment more with the pass and try to have more confidence in it by playing with it a little bit more during the regular season. But that's just me. That's the idea I got from Zay Flowers, thinking about improving his game. If he takes that next leap, this passing game could be a little bit more scary in 2024, and that's going to benefit everybody. If the Ravens want to take that next step, you can't be so one-dimensional. No matter how good you are at it, I believe having it more balanced, having a more spread-out offense can definitely help this Baltimore Ravens team next year, especially when you're going up against the Chiefs. It stinks. Nobody gives you any hope against them, but the Ravens have as much talent as anybody to dethrone them. So that almost seems like an inevitable matchup. So we're going to see if that happens. We're going to see if the Ravens take my advice there and do that in 2024. But the last segment we're going to get to is coming up after this break. Just some updates on some reworked contracts for Amari Cooper, Matthew Stafford, and some players like Alvin Kamara trying to work out with the Saints over what to do with his contract, as well as training camp started this week. We're going to talk some more on that when we return in just a few seconds. Thank you for joining me back here on the last segment of today's show. Anthony, how you're doing? Welcome back to the show. And in the question you said, do you think the air raid can work as a standalone scheme in the NFL, or would it have to be paired up with the West Coast so it doesn't become a gimmick? That's an interesting question. I think it could work as a standalone scheme in the NFL, just as long as you have the right personnel to do it. It really just all comes down to that, honestly, because the NFL is so, I feel like it's so player determined now that you'd really need some of the elite players in your position to really have a chance. And almost like scheme goes out the window. I think it could work, but it doesn't produce those results at the end of the day if you don't have the players in place to, efficiently produce at that scheme and execute with any scheme that you have. The scheme can only get you so far, I believe, if you don't have the talent. Nowadays, with how the NFL is going, more pass heavy, more offensive heavy, it really just comes down to having more talented players at times than the other team, and more often than not at the quarterback position. So, not to say that the scheme doesn't matter at all, but I believe it can work as a standalone thing. But to me, the bigger issue is finding the players that fit that scheme, and near the top of the NFL at their position, I think is almost more significant at this point in where we are with the NFL and how it's played out. But good question. I like that about the schemes in the NFL and everything like that. But we're going to just talk briefly about some of the last contract extensions or some of the latest ones that we have going on here in the NFL. The first week has brought a lot of different news, some fights breaking out and things like that. All entertaining, all great videos too of some new connections, all kind of enticing everybody to knowing that football is back. But with that comes the contract talks. We've talked a lot about it already with guys like Brandon Ayuk, guys like Amari Cooper, Matthew Stafford, Dak, everybody trying to work out their situations right now. But some of these guys have had their contract situations resolved before anything gets too out of hand. And one of them I wanted to start with was Amari Cooper. As you see on your screen, he had held out of minicamp over wanting to get a new deal, and he was entering the final year of that 5-year, $100 million contract that he got from the Dallas Cowboys in 2020. But now, sources believe that he was going to hold out of training camp. But on Tuesday, the Cleveland Browns announced that they had come to an agreement with Amari Cooper over restructuring his deal in this last year of his contract. It's not an extension, but they did change it in the matter of that $20 million that he was originally set to make as a base salary. It wasn't guaranteed. There was no guaranteed money left on his contract, but now the Cleveland Browns guaranteed that entirely. He is getting that $20 million up front and guaranteed, and also he has $5 million added on through incentives that he could still make through this last year of his contract. He is still set to be a free agent in 2025. At 30 years old, the fact that the Browns didn't really extend him, even though he threatened to hold out, it could lead me to believe that this could potentially be his last year. I don't want to completely guarantee it like T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk or anything like that, but with a growing wide receiver market, this could be a great chance for him to move on, maybe make some more money, for the Browns to just really go over all their options. And if it doesn't fit in with what they want, ideally in a price range for Amari Cooper once he is a free agent, then they don't really have to work out too many things contract-wise. So it could lead to him being this last year in Cleveland, but you don't know really too much. At 30 years old, it's not too past the point where I think teams are going to stop coming for him, but we'll see. We'll see. Interesting situation with Amari. He was one that I thought would get an extension, but the Browns opted to not do that. Then moving on to our next player to talk about, Matthew Judon, was a player that I mentioned on here before on trying to figure out a contract, cooperation with the New England Patriots, them starting a new era with their new head coach, Gerard Mayo. Would he fit into this new plan? Did Gerard Mayo have Matthew Judon in this vision of where he wanted to carry this team on in 2024? He did show up to the Patriots training camp. He plans to participate in the training camp. He's not going to hold out or hold in like any of these other players. And again, he is entering into the final year of his contract, and he is only set to make $6.5 million as a salary in this final year. So, a little bit confusing, out of the ordinary. All the sources I saw around this situation said that he was unlikely to play. Some sources said that it was guaranteed going to be his final year as a New England Patriot, that no deal was close to being done, no extension was close to being done. So with all that, it screams to not show up to training camp. But Matthew Judon on the topic, he said that he didn't really like holding out last year over the same contract dispute that he had with the Patriots. So he decided to show up this year. Obviously, he wants a new contract. He wants something to get resolved, but he wasn't going to hold out again like he did last year. He said it just didn't fit who he really was and what he really was about. So he's going to show up. He's going to participate, and hopefully that leads to him getting a new deal for his benefit. I don't know if it fits what the Patriots are trying to do or what Gerard Mayo's trying to do. Nothing has been really said about that too much in terms of progressing forward with Matthew Judon on the team, so it's in a gray area, but surprising a lot of people, Matthew Judon showing up. The next guy I wanted to talk about is on the screen, Alvin Kamara. This one's the one that's furthest back, I think, from getting done, or the least likely from getting anywhere close to being resolved, because he also had skipped the last part of mandatory minicamp for contract-related issues, but Kamara still reported to this year's training camp. The first day was on Tuesday, and he did show up there with the rest of his teammates. There were some comments he made, I think recently, yesterday or on Wednesday, just basically saying that he's not stupid. He's not going to get fined a lot of money, honestly, for missing days when he's still under contract. It's not a situation where he's entering the final year of his deal. He still has 2 years left on that 5-year deal, and he is still one of the highest paid running backs. I think he's still second in that category to Christian McCaffrey. So basically, it didn't really scream at him to hold out. I thought it was heading towards that, but he showed up. He showed out to the training camp for the New Orleans Saints, and it is a similar situation with guaranteed money, because on the last 2 years of that 5-year deal, like I mentioned, the issue is the lack of guaranteed money left on the final 2 years, and NFL media reported that they don't see this deal getting anywhere close to being done. They don't see a new deal down the line for Alvin Kamara and the Saints, especially because NFL reports said that Kamara, if the Saints were to release him after this year in 2024, the Saints could save up to $19 million in cap space if they move on from Kamara after this year. So that's obviously massive for them, and that might be more important to them than any other team in the NFL, honestly, because they've been stuck in this drawn-out cycle of trying to figure out their cap space. They've overpaid a lot of their stars, and now a lot of them are heading into the latter years of their career, and they're in a bad space, not contract-wise, but salary cap-wise, so alleviating close to $19 million per year. And with Alvin on your team, I don't think anybody really still has any expectation that the Saints are just going to click and be in the playoffs at all this year. So, with that combined with saving a lot of money, it just seems to me also that this could be the last year for Alvin Kamara with the Saints. And if he wants to work out another long-term deal elsewhere in free agency next year, I think he'll be one of the most sought-out after players, honestly, just based on what he brings to a team. But with the Saints, alleviating a lot of that cap space really, to me, just signals it all as the end for Kamara. But we'll see. I don't see too much benefit in extending him if you're going to save a lot of money with releasing him. So that's where I'm at with Alvin Kamara. And the last man I wanted to talk about is the one on your screen, Matthew Stafford, not holding out of training camp officially. Sean McVay announced that on Tuesday, that the Rams and Stafford had agreed to rework his contract and probably get him some more guaranteed money. The fine details of what they agreed upon and what they did with this new look contract wasn't disclosed like it was with Amari Cooper. But you can imagine that there is guaranteed money now included on this new contract, because that was the biggest issue as well. Like Alvin Kamara, like Amari Cooper, there was no guaranteed money on the final 2 years of Stafford's contract. After 2024, he had 2 more years left after that, and there was no guarantees, and that's not something that's ideal for a 36-year-old quarterback. So he wanted something to be done about that. He made it evident during OTAs and minicamp that he wanted that to get done, and that's where all the threats of holding out came really from, that he wanted more guaranteed money, and there was no progression up until recently. They agreed on that reworked contract, so now he doesn't have to hold out, and no details about that have been disclosed, but that's probably the best case scenario for the Rams, and honestly for Matthew Stafford, for everything that he's done for them in this period that he was traded there in order to get them to the Super Bowl. Nobody really thought, I think, it would have worked out as perfectly as it did. They had a great team, but to still go out there and do it in your first year definitely surprised a lot of people, surprised me, and he got them that Super Bowl. They traded a lot away to get him, and not only did they get to the highest peak and achieve the main goal, they are still consistently a good team. They've been able to work around trading away a lot of their first-round picks, and now have somehow one of the youngest, most exciting teams by building still through the draft and not having to sign all these free agents. They've done a great job at it, and Matthew Stafford is clearly the leader and just the pillar of what you want your players to look like in that organization. So keeping him, they did right by Matthew Stafford to kind of repay him for everything that he's done for them. It works out great. He stays probably until the end of his contract. By that time, he'll be probably close to 38, 39 years old, and then that way you have more of an amicable departure rather than holding out and this getting ugly. You don't really need that. The Rams did good by him, and now he doesn't have to hold out, and the Rams have all their team there for the start of training camp, obviously, but that's all. That's all the players I wanted to get to on just recapping some of the contract situations currently in the NFL with some of these players, and with that being the case, that'll wrap it up for today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Please remember to always like, follow, and subscribe to the show, and also follow the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of the show, check out both YouTube channels, the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel, for all different variety of forms of stories around the NFL, YouTube shorts, individual videos, and all the live videos are all on both YouTube channels as well. Finally, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions and stories around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you again for joining me, and I hope to see you guys back here with me to wrap up the week tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that great.